browsing through YouTube the other day. I saw your show. I thought it was interesting. I was hoping you guys could help me sort out through a couple of questions I had. I'll be brief because I'm actually meeting a friend here, but I wanted to preface it by just bringing me up to speed as to where I'm at.
Sure.
I grew up in a Christian home. You know, I was taught that the Bible and the stories within it are literal and everything. I don't know. I ended up investigating into the Bible because I had a daughter, and I've always had questions about certain things, and I wanted to discover the truth about them. And upon researching, I realized that not only was I not answering those questions, or I was making excuses for them, that I couldn't take the Bible literally anymore, and I couldn't reference it. So then I was kind of like forced to look at the question of origin, you know, at face value, you know, intelligent design versus evolution, the Big Bang, all of that stuff. And I began to lean towards the Big Bang and evolution just because it appeals more to, like, you know, empirical data and tangible evidence and stuff. But
hang on one second, Brendan. What if we didn't have any of that? What if we didn't have Big Bang cosmology? If we were, you know, 500 years in the past, and we didn't have a good understanding of biology and evolution? If those weren't there, does that make the God explanation more plausible?
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have a better understanding of how we got here, then I would probably conclude that God would be more probable, like that we were all here as a consequence of intelligent design.
Except that's a mistake, because the God explanation doesn't become more or less plausible on the basis of evidence for some other proposition. The God proposition has to have its own evidence. The God proposition, if we are to accurately assess it, is just as plausible today as it was 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and 10,000 years ago, which just is to say there is no reason to reach that, there's insufficient evidence to reach that conclusion. And that has always been the case as far as we can tell. So the fact that we don't have an answer doesn't mean that God is more plausible. Just like if we don't know who committed the murder, that doesn't make the butler more plausible. It does, you know, if you found a better candidate, you're not going to think that the butler did it. But if you have no candidate, you still shouldn't think that the butler did it. The butler did it as a proposition that needs its own evidence. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I mean, well, we use logic and reason as our tools, you know, to navigate through life and make decisions, and we choose, you know, what's in our minds more probable. And my question was, even if something is more logical or reasonable to be true, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right option, because
Correct.
If assuming that God does exist, wouldn't he be beyond logic and our ability to conceptualize?
No. Why would anything?
If you were able to create us, wouldn't he be beyond logic?
No. Why? If I create the Sims or an artificial intelligence, and am I beyond their comprehension? Why would you think that anything could possibly be beyond comprehension or could be in opposition to the foundations of logic?
Well, just the fact that they were able to create you, you know.
But yeah, but God didn't create logic, even if he exists.
Well, if he did exist, that would be the assumption he created everything.
No, logic isn't something that was created. Logic is how we describe the fact that things work a certain way. God couldn't. It's like could God create a rock so heavy that even he couldn't lift it? That's a tired little canard trying to show a logical contradiction. And modern theologians recognize that this is a garbage argument, because the God they're talking about isn't capable of violating logic and existing in a contradictory state. They describe God as a being with maximal greatness or maximal power. So you can't set up just an abstract logical contradiction and go, boom, there's no God. And similarly, you can't say that God or anything exists outside of the framework of logic. because now you are in contradiction, because something would both simultaneously be coherent in the sense of there's a God that we can understand, and incoherent in the sense of, oh, there's a God, but he's not bound by logic. Because if it's not bound, if it's not comprehensible, if it's not bound by logic, you can say nothing about it. Nothing.
Okay, well, I mean, if you take, the laws of physics, gravity, Earth, and everything, you go outside of Earth, there's things outside of Earth that we don't understand. The infinity of space. Everything here has a beginning.
What do you
and an
mean?
end. It's
What do you
like,
mean
how
we don't understand? There are things that we don't know, but when you talk about
or
things
understand.
Okay, so what? What the hell does that have to do with whether or not there's a God? The fact that there are let's say there's 5 billion things that I don't know or understand. There's no reason to think that any of those is a God, and there's no reason to think that any of those 5 billion violate logic or are something that I would be incapable of understanding if I had sufficient information.
Well, it's not just that we don't understand the infinity of space. It violates all the rules that we do understand.
No, it doesn't.
Like, how can something be infinite? How can something be infinite?
Nothing is infinite in that sense. Infinity is not a quantity, it's a description.
You're talking about God of the gaps, basically.
A description of quantity, right?
No, it's not a description of quantity. So well, anyway, I'm going to let Claire go.
No. It's the God of the gaps, because you said that 500 years ago you would have believed in God because it was the best thing. And now that we know better, we don't believe that anymore. That's the God of the gaps. And as far as infinity goes and finality, that's one of the things I want to talk about. Human minds have a really hard time with that. It is true. We can't even really think about, can you really hold in your mind 10 years' time? Not really. Our brains just aren't capable of it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so because we can't deal with infinity or finality, we turn it over to God. Why? Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's God. It's just something we don't understand. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that no matter what worldview I contend with, they all seem to be nested in some degree of uncertainty.
Of course.
So it's hard. And aside from,
my view is that you can't be absolutely certain about anything.
Right, and I've based my moral axiom on, everything in Scripture and God my whole life, and so.
So you think gay people
really
deserve to be killed?
All this it's kind of a grim realization, that I can't really take the Bible seriously.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough evidence. I won't go into all of that, but now it's like it's hard to have a new axiom that I can nest my morals in. It's like the major contenders, obviously, murder, rape, and etc. They're mala and say universally accepted as wrong, but it's like all of the little stuff. It's like how do you?
Yes, it's hard.
What do you base your morals off of?
It's hard work. There's a reason people accept the lazy because God said so thing. Sorting through and figuring out what is going to be moral in what situation is difficult. But you can build a good foundation. I've given a talk on the superiority of secular morality that addresses this. Sam Harris has written a book called The Moral Landscape that begins to address this. And then you have things like secular humanism, which start with a foundation of, okay, look, we're all on this planet. Apparently, there's no gods that are going to intervene, so we got to figure out how to do all this shit on our own. And then you begin with simple principles. You begin with life is generally preferable to death, health is generally preferable to sickness, and you work towards solutions that allow for people to not just survive, but to thrive and prosper. And then you say, okay, if we're going to evaluate a situation, something that may be moral in one situation may be immoral. Is it immoral to break the glass on a storefront? Well, it depends. If the person next to you is having a heart attack and there's a defibrillator on the other side of the glass, then breaking that glass to get the defibrillator to revive them may be the most moral action you take. Life isn't simple. And so you have to look at motivations, you have to look at consequences of actions, you have to look at them both for yourself and for society. It's a lot of hard work. I don't think it's as nearly as difficult as many people make it out to be. And in the conversations about morality, people tend to come up with these, well, what about this really, really weird scenario? When by and large, in your everyday life, figuring out the right thing to do, not that difficult.
Yeah.
And it's not just a matter of opinion or popularity. It's about what benefits us, what benefits,
I want to talk to you about morality because that's a big thing. Yeah, it's not, you're on the right track. If you're already asking questions, that's amazing. Keep going. You're doing fine. And the fact that you have a child on this journey with you, I think that's for the better, because the child.
Well, yeah, I just, I didn't want her growing up with questions, and that's what sparked the whole journey to truth. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was.
I know that's supposed to sound awesome and you really meant well, but when I hear I didn't want her to grow up with questions, I'm like, that's all I want her to grow up with.
Yeah, I want her to ask every
massive
single
questions, and
right?
and be willing to say.
I wanted to
but
be able to answer them for her.
Exactly. But as parents, the first thing that people should do is say, not just I don't know, but I don't know, but let's go find out. And you find out together anything that you don't know. And now everybody's learning, and they begin to value exploration, inquiry, and discovery. And that, God, what could be better in life?
Did you know that the ACA is starting up a podcast that eventually will become one of these shows called Secular Parenting? Parenting Beyond Belief.
Sweet.
We've already shot we've already shot a couple of episodes, and hopefully those will be coming out pretty soon. So we can answer, it'll be call-in eventually, and we'll be able to answer all sorts of questions. It's nothing but parents and people who care about raising kids asking
questions. But you're calling it secular parenting, right?
I'm sorry?
How do you mean? What? Parenting Beyond Belief.
Did we talk to Dale McGowan?
Yeah, he's on it.
Oh.
He's on it.
See?
He gave us his blessing.
I was
he's
like,
on the show.
Before we use his name, we should probably talk to Dale. To Dale, and now he's on the show. So
he's the other host.
I'm just some jackass that shows up every couple weeks, but
that's okay.
Anyway, Brendan, I appreciate the call, and good luck, and maybe touch base with us from time to time and let us know how it's going, and when you come across questions or things that you kind of discovered that made your transition easier. And you might also want to call into Secular Parenting or write into them once they get running.
Dale McGowan's got a couple of really good books. Parenting Beyond Belief is one of them, of course, and then the other one is Raising Free Thinkers. They helped me so much because I grew up in the North where religion wasn't a big deal. I don't care what people say, it's different in the South. I had to know about raising kids without religion here because religion is everywhere and in your face. It's in the education, it's everywhere. So these books will help you a lot.
Yeah, I'll have to check this out. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Bye.
Morality.
Yes.
It's very simple if you look at it in terms of evolution. We are social animals.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. I mean, if you look at the way we live, everything has to be conducive to living socially. If you don't live socially, you're a bear. You're a solitary animal. You don't have the same rules. Nobody cares if a bear kills another bear because that's part of their social rules. They're not social rules.
When I say that it's easier than most people make of it, that's the type of thing I'm talking about. But it's more complex. Just saying that we're social animals doesn't give people the tools to figure out the right thing in the right situation.
It's a start.
It is.
Because it's easier than they think because we're already wired for it. We have empathy when we're infants. We have.
That's the thing I laugh at is that people like when you try to say we're wired for it, and they're like, well, what about the psychopath? The psychopath thinks it's okay. Yes, and some people are miswired, and the fact that we can recognize that, just like we know when a woman has a child, there's a chemical process that actually bonds them as well. And you can watch a new mother with her baby, and you can tell in a hot second whether or not that connection has taken place or whether this woman's about to experience incredible postpartum depression, attachment disorder, things like that. You can spot that. And this is why when we talk, people are like, well, how can you possibly justify putting someone in an insane asylum? Okay.
Because they are not abiding by the rules.
We may have also gotten it wrong on a number of occasions, but by and large, we can, as long as it's not like a single person just de facto making pronouncements, we have experts take a look and decide this person is a danger to themselves and others. Boom. And it doesn't mean they're criminal in that case, so we have a different institution for people who are dangerous due to mental disorders. And the goal is to protect them and to protect society. If somebody shows up and says they're Napoleon, we know there's an issue. May not be worth locking somebody up because we don't know yet if there's danger. Why is it then that when somebody says they've heard from God, we don't begin with the same kind of default position? God told me this. Cool. You know how many times I've had family members and religious people tell me what God has told them, and it never comes true?
I think there's a difference between the two of them. Napoleon was an actual person. There's history. There's all sorts of documentation. With God, having it talk to yourself and thinking you talk to it, it's the brain, the way it works, you're talking to yourself.
Well, I mean, okay, whether or not Napoleon, if somebody said, I'm Lord Voldemort, okay, not a real person,
Right.
fictional character, etc.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't, by the way, I'm not remotely saying that religious belief is mental illness. I'm not. Matter of fact, I've repeatedly spoken against that. The exercise was in believability of a claim, not whether or not it's mental illness, because it's not. Religious belief is just you're wrong. You have some bad information and
Yep.
you're wrong about it.
Yep.